Do you regret that, Home Secretary?
Yeah, of course. Look, I do, Nick. Of course I do. Good morning, Nick. No, look, there is no doubt. There were 92,000 cases that had been sat waiting to be looked at. Those were the legacy cases. They were applications that were made before the 28th of June 2022 and had not been looked at. We committed to processing all those applications by clearing that backlog. And we've looked at all those cases. They have all been through the process. In the vast majority of those cases, a final decision has been made. In a relatively small number, about 4,500 cases, where there is a dispute, where there is perhaps something like an age dispute or whatever, or where there is ongoing investigation for perhaps something like security concerns, we have not come to a final decision, but they've all been processed, so the backlog has been cleared. And in addition to the 92,000 that were in that backlog, we have also processed contemporary applications, meaning last year we processed more applications in a year than in any year since 2002, because we've massively sped up the process, but without reducing quality, because actually our grant rate has come down slightly.
The grant rate is, what has the grant rate come down to?
It's come down to 67%. So it was 71%, 72% respectively in the previous 2 years. So it's actually come down somewhat. So we are still robust in terms of the process. We've put more people on the process. We've sped up the process.
Home Secretary, in 2018, the grant rate was 33%. That's
So
not that long ago. I mean, can I put it to you rather crudely? You've effectively, you've waved everybody through. The tough ones have gone to quotes review, and the rest have been waved through. If this was VAR, you've awarded every goal.
Now, the point is, Nick, some quite significant circumstances have changed over the last couple of years, including the situation in Afghanistan, for example. So there are reasons why the UK's grant rate has jumped. They are not hugely different to the circumstances that our other European neighbours are experiencing. It is a particularly challenging set of circumstances, which is why we're doing things differently, which is why we're tightening the legislation, and that legacy backlog was before the first tightening of the legislation. The Illegal Migration Act has tightened it even further, so that will give us tighter criteria. And we're also taking action with regard to returns, which is why the people who have been returned back to their country of origin, whether voluntarily or enforced, has also increased by 2/3, by 67%, 66%.
This has been attained, I understand, by hiring an additional 1,200 caseworkers. Will those staff now be retained? Will they be kept in those posts?
Well, so the new scale of operation, the new process, we absolutely intend to keep in place. Whether it's exactly 1,200, I wouldn't want to commit to exactly that. But the point is, the volume of people working on it will be dependent on the volume of applications. Our plan is to bring down the volume of applications, and if that happens, of course, we won't need as many people going through the process. So that's why I'm not saying I'm definitely committed to 1,200. But the point being, the process has been sped up, the number of people has increased, and we are reducing because we are working to stop the boats. We've reduced small boat arrivals. We are looking to reduce the number of applications coming in the first place.
How many people are currently kept in hotels, Home Secretary?
So I don't have that figure. I will need to get, because we've been reducing the figure, I need to, when I get back to the office later on, I will get the update from the back end of last year, but I've not had the most up-to-date figures. But we've been putting downward pressure on the numbers because we've increased the process and we're looking at better and cheaper alternatives to hotels. So the numbers have been coming down. We intend to continue bringing them down.
One set of figures that no one can argue with is that the number of small boat crossings have dropped, and has dropped considerably this year, broadly speaking by about 33%, and no one can dispute that. What's your target for this year, Home Secretary?
Well, my target is to bring it down to zero. I mean, I'm completely committed, and actually...
In 2024?
That's my target. My target is to reduce it to zero, to stop the boats, and I'm unambiguous about that. And the point is, actually, last year, the final figures last year, it was 36% reduction year on year. In the last half of last year, compared with the last half of the year before that. It was down by 45%. And the last quarter of last year, compared with the last quarter of the year before that, it was down by over 60%. So the trend is heading in the right direction. And I know people, and I know some people have said, oh, it's just about the weather. The point is, the weather this year is basically, in terms of good sailing days, pretty much the same as last year. The 102 good sailing days this year, 106 good sailing days last year. So they're similar numbers. Those really significant reductions are because of the work we're doing with our international partners, with France, with Romania, with Germany, with Albania, and others, breaking the supply chain for things like boats and engines. So we're going to continue doing things like that, and of course, bring forward Rwanda, which will have a deterrent effect. That's how we intend to stop the boats.
All right. Lastly on this subject, before we move on to a couple of other things, I think you referenced the 17,316 asylum cases that withdraw. Do these people simply go missing? What happens to them, Home Secretary?
Well, it's a mix of things. Some of them will have left the country. Some of them will realise that their applications are not going to go anywhere, and some of them leave the country. There was a 2/3 increase in voluntary returns. That's people choosing to go home. Some people try and sneak into the illicit economy. We go looking for them and we find them and then we send them home. So there's actually also been a 2/3 increase in the number of enforced returns. So whether they choose to leave or whether we kick them out, we've increased by 2/3 last year the number of people. So we are making strong progress on this. There is still work to do. This is not mission accomplished. There's still a lot of work to do on this, and we intend to keep working on it.
Couple of other matters with your brief as Home Secretary, you'll be aware, and there are no charges as we speak, of the fatal stabbing of a schoolboy, 16-year-old boy up in North London as he waited for the New Year's Eve fireworks. A word on that, if you would, Home Secretary.
Oh, look, this is it's terribly sad when you see reports of this at a time of what's meant to be a time of celebration, and obviously my condolences go to his family, his friends, and his loved one. And of course, I haven't diarised it yet, but I will have a regular update with the Mayor of London. I have no doubt this will be one of the issues that we discuss when we speak.
Front page of another newspaper, you might not have had sight of this. Police are investigating the first case of rape in the metaverse. A child under the age of 16 was attacked in a virtual reality video game. Officers say she suffered the same psychological and emotional trauma as someone who'd been raped in the real world. What challenges does this present to policing? Is this a good use of police time, the metaverse? Home Secretary.
Well, look, I know it's easy to dismiss this as being not real, but the whole point of these virtual environments is they are incredibly immersive. And we're talking about a child here, and a child has gone through a sexual trauma, and it will have had a very significant psychological effect. And we should be very, very careful about being. I'm not suggesting you were, but we should be very careful about being dismissive of this. And I think it's also worth realising that someone who is willing to put a child through a trauma like that digitally may well be someone that could go on to do terrible things in the physical realm. So I do think it's right that we look seriously at this, and we've got to understand that in the world of immersive digital media, I think we have a duty to take issues like this seriously. And it might seem strange to some, but I do actually think this is something well worth looking into.
And finally, just before Christmas, I understand you made perhaps it was an inappropriate gag about your wife, who I had the pleasure of meeting, and I can really, she's a very glamorous and very attractive woman. But you made a gag about Rohypnol. Do you regret that, Home Secretary?
Yeah, of course. Look, I do, Nick. Of course I do. And it's frustrating because that happened on the same day that I brought forward legislative changes to toughen our approach to spiking. In the first day in the job, I made it absolutely clear that I wanted the Home Office to prioritise the protection of women and girls. I've had the similar conversations with the College of Policing, with senior police officers, and when I was Foreign Secretary, I put in place targets to make sure that our aid spending supported women and girls. So I've always been very, very committed to this.
But I'm very conscious your credibility in a way, Home Secretary.
So look, I'm very conscious. Yeah, I'm very conscious that will have been hurtful for a number of people, and I do regret it. Of course I do, and I do apologise, and that apology is heartfelt. But I'm absolutely determined to keep working to protect women and girls.
Did Mrs. Cleverly get an extra large Christmas present as a make-up? Did you go out and buy an extra gift?
No, not because of that. Not because of that, but because she's wonderful.
I'm grateful for your time. James Cleverly, thank you. Home Secretary appearing here on LBC.